в бесконечной темноте, и Богу была названа цена. Прогнулись все и братья во Христе, прогнулось все, но не моя страна. Был урожайным высокосный год, и кровью смерть была пьяным пьяна, а твой свинцовый гнулся небосвод. Прогнулось все, но не моя страна. Полнеба пламя, полнеба смог, Донбассом нами и с нами Бог. Полнеба пламя, полнеба смог, Россия с нами и с нами Бог. Из памяти не предали отцов, здесь не отдали дедовской земли. Какой ценой не отыщешь слов, все за отчизну жизни берегли. И снова сила русская в руках, и жизнь, и смерть за родину красна. Стоит и держит небосвод века, моя непокоренная страна. Полнеба пламя, полнеба смог, Донбассом нами и с нами Бог. Полнеба пламя, полнеба смог, Россия с нами и с нами Бог. Пусть суждено погибнуть на кресте, но на колени не поставить нас. В кровавом поле
Президент Российской Федерации Владимир Владимирович Путин подписывает указ президента Российской Федерации о признании Донецкой Народной Республики. Президент Российской Федерации Владимир Владимирович Путин подписывает указ президента Российской Федерации о признании Луганской Народной Республики.
Войска вот сейчас прямо туда пойдут после нашей с вами встречи здесь. Первое. Второе. Предсказывать какую-то конкретную канву возможных действий вообще невозможно. Это зависит от конкретной ситуации, которая складывается на месте, на земле, что называется. Ну а что касается вопроса, можно ли и нужно ли все вопросы решать с помощью силы, то или оставаться на стороне добра. Ну а почему вы думаете, что добро должно быть бессильным всегда? Я так не считаю. Я думаю, что как раз добро предполагает возможность себя защищать. Из этого и будем исходить.
As for using military force abroad, of course, we signed an agreement yesterday, and in these agreements with Donetsk and Lugansk Public Republic, there are relevant points which state that we are going to continue. We will provide all type of assistance, including military assistance. If there is a conflict, of course, if it's necessary, we will follow through on the obligations that we undertook.
The House should be in no doubt that the deployment of these forces in sovereign Ukrainian territory amounts to a renewed invasion of that country. And by denying Ukraine's legitimacy as a state and presenting its very existence as a mortal threat to Russia, Putin is establishing the pretext for a full-scale offensive. I think honourable members will struggle to understand how to contemplate how in the year 2022 a national leader might calmly and deliberately plot the destruction of a peaceful neighbour. And yet the evidence of his own words suggests that is exactly what President Putin is doing. When I said on Saturday that his scheme to subvert and invade Ukraine was already in motion before our eyes, the events of the last 24 hours have, sadly, shown this to be true. We must now brace ourselves for the next possible stages of Putin's plan. The violent subversion of areas of eastern Ukraine by Russian operatives and their hirelings, followed by a general offensive by the nearly 200,000 Russian troops gathered on the frontiers at peak readiness to attack. If the worst happens, then a European nation of 44 million men, women and children would become the target of a full-scale war of aggression, waged without a shred of justification for the absurd and even mystical reasons that Putin described last night. Unless the situation changes, the best efforts of the United States, of this country, France, Germany and other allies to avoid conflict through patient diplomacy may be in vain.
While I will not send American servicemen to fight in Ukraine, we have supplied the Ukrainian military with equipment to help them defend themselves. We provided training and advice and intelligence for the same purpose. And make no mistake, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. An attack against one NATO country is an attack against all of us. The United States' commitment to Article 5 is sacrosanct. Already, in response to Russia's buildup of troops, I've sent additional U.S. forces to bolster NATO's eastern flank. Several of our allies have also announced they'll add forces and capabilities to ensure deterrence and defense along NATO's eastern flank. We will also continue to conduct military exercises with our allies and partners to enhance defensive readiness. And if Russia invades, we'll take further steps to reinforce our presence in NATO, reassure us for our allies, and deter further aggression. To be clear, if Russia decides to invade, that would also have consequences here at home. But the American people understand that defending democracy and liberty is never without cost. This is a cause that unites Republicans and Democrats. And I want to thank the leaders and members of Congress of both parties who've forcefully spoken out in defense of our most basic, most bipartisan, most American principles. We are not seeking direct confrontation with Russia, though I've been clear that if Russia targets Americans in Ukraine, we will respond forcefully. And if Russia attacks the United States or our allies through asymmetric means, like disruptive cyber attacks against our companies or critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. But we're moving in lockstep with our NATO allies and partners to deepen our collective defense against threats in cyberspace.
There are two issues. One, informing the American public, the Security Council, and the world about the evidence to allow us to make the conclusion that Saddam Hussein remains a danger because he is not cooperating, he is still harboring, and he is still seeking the accumulation of weapons of mass destruction. That case, I believe, has been made. And I hope now that the American people will have this regurgitated in a number of venues and fora over the next weeks, that they will be as convinced as I am.
While I will not send American servicemen to fight in Ukraine, we have supplied the Ukrainian military with equipment to help them defend themselves. We provided training and advice and intelligence for the same purpose. And make no mistake,
считаю необходимым принять уже давно назревшее решение. Незамедлительно признать независимость и суверенитет Донецкой Народной Республики и Луганской Народной Республики.
Свинцовых, но за небо. памяти не предали отцов, здесь не отдали дедовской земли, какой ценою не отыщешь слов, здесь за отчизну жизни берегли, и снова сила русская в руках, и жизнь и смерть за родину красна, стоит и держит небосвод века, моя непокоренная страна, полнеба пламя, полнеба смог, Донбасс за нами и с нами Бог, полнеба пламя, полнеба смог, Россия с нами и с нами Бог. Пусть суждено погибнуть на кресте, но на колени не поставит нас, в кровавом поле ж не один совсем.